guys, it's Ash, and we're back in the library, but we're not doing monthly reads into the library. I'm actually starting something a little different because recently I have started doing book reviews and, that sort of thing for indie authors. And so this series, I guess, will be indie reads. Maybe? Possibly? It's pretty good. I didn't want to lump them into my monthly read videos because, let's face it, these are living, breathing authors and they didn't need to be lumped in with many authors who are not. I wanted to give a little special highlight to each of these books and each of these authors, just to really show you guys what they're doing and the really cool things that they're creating and all the hard work they're putting in. And I'm going to start off the series with A Soul Reclaimed by Shayna Grissom. This is her debut novel and it came out this year, and she's already working on the second one, which is really, really exciting. Anyways, this is part one of a series, and that's something that you should keep in mind when reading this. It's a pretty quick read, actually, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm not just saying that. She was kind enough to provide me a copy of her book, but this is all, from this point forward and everything, this is all my legitimate, honest review for it. So the story itself follows the character of Nora, who is a 16-year-old girl, as she kind of tries to find herself and find where she belongs in the world. Of course, when I say the world, I also mean hell. The entire story takes place in hell, which is broken up into 7 really distinct and neat sections, which we get to see a lot of, which is a lot of fun. It also isn't hell kind of as we think of it, not all fire and brimstone. There's actually lots of nice places, pretty trees. The third region of hell even has dogs, which is pretty neat, which is where I was sent. If you go on her website, which I'm going to link below and everything, you can take a soul placement quiz, and so yeah, I got the one with dogs. Nora finds herself alone. She lives a decent life, but she does feel alone and kind of ostracized. Her maid and her tutor are her closest companions through all of this. But for reasons I'm not going to get into, she finds herself literally alone in the world and struggling to figure out what she should do next and how to survive and all of that. And luckily for her, a dashing hero comes to her rescue by the name of Aeschere, a really, really, really old vampire who somehow became my favorite character, and I did not intend for that to happen, but yeah, it just did. And he's really neat because he has a lot of history and depth, and for the first book, all of that is obscured. You don't really know as much about him because he doesn't know that much about him. I'll let you work that out. Also, I am doing a beta reading on the second book, so I'm kind of watching myself because I know some things that happened in that book, which I've been working my way through, and I'm just like, not. So anyway, I'm going to try not to say anything. I'm definitely not going to spoil anything for that book or this book. I'm determined. Anyway, but back to the characters. Aeschere and Nora end up traveling together, and they take you through all 7 regions of hell, which is really, really neat. I just want to take a moment to appreciate that because the way Shayna does it is very nice because, of course, all the regions are distinctly different from each other. And because we're going through all of them throughout the book, more or less, it would be an opportunity for an author to do the paragraph upon paragraph upon page of description of the different landscapes. And Shayna doesn't do that, and yet we still get a very vivid, a very clear picture of these worlds. So she did it really, really well. As somebody who can occasionally fall victim to over-describing things, I was blown away by it because it just, with the action of the people in these worlds, with a little bit of description about this and that, with Nora's own reactions and Aeschyre's as well, it really came together to show you what's happening instead of to tell you what's happening. So I just want to, kudos to you for doing that so well. The book itself, in terms of a read, starts off a little bit slow. Not like unbearably slow, You know, I, again, was given a copy of this and was going to read it for a review, but even if I hadn't been doing that, I would have continued reading it. It was still interesting. It just wasn't super snappy, fast-paced. And knowing now and truly seeing the sequel of it, it makes a lot of sense, because what Shayna used this book for, in a lot of ways, is setting up the future. And so the beginning of this book of the first book, you have Nora and Aegis traveling throughout hell, and you get a lot of that, and there is action, and there is intrigue, and that sort of thing, but it's not constant, super snappy doing things. So you get a really great feeling of the world for that first book. So that's what I mean when I say slow. I don't mean like, oh my god, when are we gonna get to the story? I just mean there's not as much direct interaction with the plot during the beginning of this book. It's more travel based and introspection in terms of Nora figuring out who she is and that sort of thing. But it does, I mean, it picks up about, I don't know, it picks up not super late into the book, but again, it's not like right at the beginning. And from there on, it's kind of like go, go, go. So it's still a very engaging read. And not only an engaging read, but also, like I said, a quick read. I think I finished it in 2 days, and that's including school and other things as well. It's roughly 300 and some odd pages, about 350, I think. So not, by novel standards, it's your pretty average novel. But like I said, it's just snappy, it's quick, and you just find yourself burning through those 350 some odd pages. In terms of characters, I think Nora is really interesting because she is a 16-year-old girl who ends up in a very difficult situation throughout this, and her mindset really captures that. Just in the first book alone, we have her maturing and changing and learning more about the world around her, but there's still a lot of that teenager in there. So in my opinion, I think it's a very, very good blending of character. You know, it's like, 'cause she is suddenly like the heroine of a fantasy novel, but she still maintains that teenage aspect, which keeps the believability of her being like, okay, yeah, this is my life now, but also I'm still a child or still a young adult, or somewhere in between that, I suppose. So I thought that was really well done, and her as a character is interesting to get to know and to understand, and because she is constantly changing, constantly maturing and growing, it means that throughout that first novel alone, we see her character changing and adapting, which keeps her very interesting and very engaging throughout the whole thing. Like I said before, Aegis, who is your other really important character in this, became my favorite for just various reasons, and I can't really tell you what made him my favorite without giving things away, but just know he's great. I like him. I like the depth of character. I like the juxtaposition between having a super old vampire who actually acts like a super old vampire, you know, just in the sense that he has that world weariness and the wisdom and knowledge that comes with being ancient, and putting him with this 16-year-old girl who is still learning about who she is, let alone the world around her. And so they mesh together really well. They have a lot of things that bind them together, but there's enough difference there that keeps it an engaging partnership, if you will. Some of the other characters, you have Vinicio, which is Nora's stepdad and also the steward of hell at the time, so basically the ruler of hell. And you really get a good sense of him as a person and his motivations. He has a few chapters that are told from, or a few sections that are told from his point of view, so you kind of get to know him. My only issue with characters is Bella, Nora's mother, who comes off kind of flat, but from what we gather about her as a person, she's a rather flat person. So in terms of that, I think her dialogue and her characterization and the interactions we have with her show that she's a rather flat person. So I think as a stylistic choice it goes well. I would have liked a little bit more on Bella, but all in all I think it did really well. I think the characters were believable and they were engaging and we got to know what drives them. The only issue I have in any way, shape, or form with this book is the ending. Not that it's a bad ending, but just in the sense, without spoiling anything. Let's just say that Nora ends up going against the crown, or the steward, I suppose, and there is a bit of a clash between them. And so my issue with this is that, like, immediately, both branches of the military are on Nora's side. No one stayed loyal to the steward, not even for his money or sway or whatever, or because they didn't necessarily want to follow a 16-year-old girl. They all just immediately joined Nora's side. And it happens, the ending, the resolution, this battle between the crown and Nora is very, very short. You know, we have like 300 plus pages of traveling with Nora and getting to know her and finally understanding who she is, and then we have our end goal, which is fighting the crown, and the whole thing took, let's see, it took about 12 pages of conflict and then about 6 pages of actual battle. Now, yes, I need to remember, of course, this is a fantasy young adult novel, so things are easier. You know, the heroine gets the backing of the people and wins the fight without a hitch and that sort of thing. It's just kind of, it just felt too easy, you know, and the book ends almost directly after that fight. So we have all that build up and then the fight itself is very small and then boom, the book ends. Now, that would bother me a lot more if it wasn't part one. In a lot of ways, this first book feels kind of like a long prologue. You know, there's a lot happening and it's interesting and engaging, but it really sets you up for the second book. The first book on its own is it's clearly not meant to be a standalone novel, which obviously, because it's part one of a series, but it works well on its own. It's interesting on its own, but knowing that there will be a sequel kind of makes it a bit more engaging because, again, I've read a little bit of the second book so far, and that first novel really, really sets up this second book super well. And from what I've read thus far, this second book is a bit more punch after punch after punch. It keeps you going. It's very action driven. There's also a lot more plots and in-depth things happening within Nora and also within the world around her. Do you see how hard I'm struggling not to say anything that would give it away? So yeah, I think this, having read some of the second book, I think this first book does an incredible job of being part one of a series. So yeah, for a debut novel, I found this really well crafted, really engaging. I love what she did with the world. I can't get over that. It's such even without a whole lot of description, just what little bits we've seen of the world, even now I can picture each region in my head. I know what each region is about, what the people are like, and it really impressed me. Nora as a character, I enjoyed. Aegis as a character, I loved. And again, going into the second book, I enjoy Nora even more, and Aegis I still love dearly. So yeah, I genuinely recommend this book because I finished it, and of course I knew I'd be able to go ahead and read the second one, but before I even made that thought, I was like, God, I can't wait till the sequel. Like, I just want to keep going. I just want to keep going. I was like, oh yeah, I can. So I really think you're gonna enjoy it. I really recommend checking it out. It is available everywhere. I'm surprised it's actually available in a lot of places. Of course, I'm gonna link to it down below, and it will be linked to my local bookstore because they have it. But check it out, your own local bookstore or wherever you want to get your books. Shayna, all of her information will be linked down below. Check her out. She's a cool person, and obviously she creates awesome things. This book, it just is fun, made me laugh out loud, probably way more than it should, but it still had all that depth of character and a lot of commentary on our world today, actually. And probably the biggest one is a good reminder that we can change the world for the greater good. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, look in the description for everything that I've been talking about. You seriously should check it out. Thank you, Shayna, for giving me a copy of your awesome book, and I cannot wait to have a copy of the second one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.